Hey everybody, this is Liz from Augusta, and today I'm with Dave from, is it Saline or Saline, Arkansas?
Celine. So the locals will call it Celine.
Okay, so obviously we need to fix that on our end because we say Saline.
That'll probably help. I just think you're an outsider.
Okay, so I want to know how you heard about Augusta.
Yeah, great question. So going back 4 years, I was pretty new to being self-employed as well as the green industries. Really, on the technical side, I had some basic skills. I sort of knew what I was doing, but I felt really lacking in just a broader knowledge base of how to build a business, how to grow a business, how to incorporate best practices. So I was looking and searching for everything. While I was working, I would listen to podcasts, YouTube videos, whatever. And it didn't take long to come across Mike. He was just, I guess, probably pretty beginning in his influencer role. Again, this is like 4 years ago. Mike was still, he was pretty young then too. He's young now, but he's pretty young then. But right away, I was picking up a lot from him. I enjoyed listening to him. And when I found out about the landscape business course, in the process of listening to him, that I signed up for that just about 4 years ago. It's probably 4 years ago this spring. And then through that, I had contact with Mike and was exposed to the beginning ideas of the franchise and those possibilities.
Fantastic. So did you have a lawn care business before you knew about Mike? Had you already started?
Well, not necessarily lawn care. So I was in landscaping. I didn't really, there was no, I had no desire to do the lawn care. I didn't mind the mowing, but I enjoyed the creative side, the building side, learning new things. I was still really new to it as even as a possible career direction. I was still at that point just sort of testing it out. And I didn't like doing the lawn care. I didn't see it as personally profitable because, and at the time, part of my lack of knowledge, I didn't understand scalability.
Mm,
I mean, I knew in a sense that what I was doing wasn't scalable. Like I didn't know that I could hire literally just dozens of people to do what I was doing, whether it's retaining wall or sod install. I mean, theoretically you could, but I instinctively knew there were obstacles to that, but I didn't quite put the connection that simple services and the lawn care side of the green industries needed to be needed to be developed and grown. And so I was only mowing like 8 lawns. I think I had 8 lawns that I was mowing,
wow.
and I was doing projects, just multiple projects.
hmm Well, I'll come back to that, but I believe that you're one of the first 10, aren't you?
I am, yes.
And
Mhm.
so, what was the final thing that really convinced you that you wanted to be brave enough to be on the ground level of growing this thing with Mike?
Well, the biggest barrier to entry is the price, right? So, what is being a part of the Augusta brand have to offer in
hmm
exchange for, this exchange of partnership and upfront costs and ongoing costs? And I knew, well, three things because I've thought about this. The first one was part of my complete lack of knowledge and still learning. I've got a lot to learn is about the marketing side of
hmm
this business. And I already knew from listening to Mike that he was way ahead of not just me, but of anybody else that I was listening to. That I felt like his insights, and not just at the time, because it's changed from 4 years ago. They're
Right.
not the same strategies. So Mike's evolution was far ahead of mine was ever going to be. And so even just the price of him as a marketing consultant, him being the brand,
hmm
the price of building a website, which I didn't even have a website. So I knew that I was going to have to pay someone to build me, a website that was competitive
hmm
and ongoing education. Like I've already spent a lot of money on education in my life.
hmm
I knew the value of it. And I know that to get a good education, you have to pay for it. And so I felt like the upfront training, the ongoing training, the marketing expertise, the marketing tools like the website and the
hmm
brand, those all were a very fair exchange for the price.
hmm
And that was a good investment to me. I would do it again. Then I noticed something instinctively, and I think everyone that gets to know Mike and the people that Mike has now surrounded himself with is that this is a brand, this is an idea, this is a movement that is going places.
hmm
And a rising tide raises all ships. And I knew
Exactly.
that. Yeah, and even though, at the time I'm looking at Mike, he was probably 23, 24 years old. I'm in my 40s. But I was like, this guy's going somewhere. He's so young. Like there's only one way to go up. And even if I just, glean a portion of the strategies and successes that he's already built, he's going to continue to build. And I've been proven right to myself in that. So over almost 4 years now, 3.5 years, I've definitely seen that. And
What was the price when you started?
so I believe that the official price was 15,000, but Mike had a one-time offer of half price. So
Wow.
I think it was right around $8,000. And
Wow.
then I want to say it worked out. We did not pay monthly fees and half price for 6 months, or 6 months no fees, and 1 year half price. It was something out of a really nice startup. And to Mike's credit, they were learning too. And there was no
Right.
command center back then. There was not even the tools they had now. The P for P was just, kind of a clumsy Excel program. So there wasn't even the perks that there was now, but there was still, a really low, looking back, a low barrier to entry.
So he knew, though, that the people that committed to him and had enough faith in him were taking a big risk because you
And
guys were
that,
the first
yeah,
ones.
I never saw it as a risk. It was one of those things. To me, it was just a capital. I had to come up with the money. And if
Hmm.
I'd had the money readily, I would not have hesitated at all. So I've never seen, following the leadership that's at Augusta, I've never seen that as risk. I mean, certainly there is. The wheels could fall if anything,
Hmm.
but from from a probability standpoint, no.
Okay, so going back to something you mentioned before that you were doing projects. So are
Mhm.
you still doing mainly projects or do you have some recurring mowing customers?
Yeah, we built up our recurring customers. At the most I had, I think, was 84 this past year, recurring clients. So I went from 8 to 84 in the last 2.5 years. But then, even then, I'm still really clumsy at that transition because there's almost zero competition for projects, at least where I'm at. I think
I
a lot of
see.
guys deal with that. If you have projects, there's people knocking down your doors for jobs. I even finally started raising my prices on projects to reduce some of those bid acceptances, and I was still booked out 8 weeks on projects. So I think last year, I would say, without looking at the numbers off the top of my head, it was probably about 60 to 70% projects and probably 30 to 40% recurring revenue.
So what is
And I
that
would love to
shift?
flip those.
Yeah, okay. So
Yeah.
what is that shift in your mindset? At what point do you start saying no to them, knowing that you need to keep this recurring income going?
It, it's that dangling carrot. It's the easy
Yes,
money. And because I like doing it and I'm good at doing it and I've got a decent reputation in the community, because it's not that large a community, that I will continue to do it as long as I can until I can build up the recurring services. Because I need that for cash flow. I need it for the marketing. I need it for my own personal income needs.
hmm
Um, so I mean, there's things going on in my personal life that I need that. I'm still at that. I don't have the luxury of just being like, knowing my avatar and focusing in on it. That's what Alex Hermosi says. Know your avatar and
Yes,
focus in on it. And I want to do that. And I'm trying to get to that point. But, at the end of the day, I still have financial obligations, and, I'm not going to turn down a $3,000 French drain when I can do it in a day and a half. So
right,
it's a little
right.
bit of the practical, a little bit of the demand.
Yes. So it's kind of a mirage too, right? It is very difficult to turn down. Let's say you got, a job that had three or, had a French drain and then three or four retaining walls, 4 foot retaining walls. That would be hard to
Mhm.
turn down, wouldn't it?
It would be, especially, and this is the way I'm doing my pricing model now. I'm at that point to where when I make a bid, if they accept it, I want it to be the kind that I giggle when they accept it. So that's sort of if it makes me laugh or kind of chuckle to myself that, wow, okay, I'll do it. If you want to pay that, I'll do it. And of course, that's going to reflect on some of my acceptance percentages. But at the same time, all my marketing strategies for this upcoming year are going to be for retaining services, recurring services. So hopefully, that if that flip can ever switch, if I can flip those numbers at least at the onset to where we're doing 60 to 70% of revenues recurring, then I'll be able to be more and more. Um, I'll be able to raise my prices more and more on the projects because they're not as essential now for necessary cash flow.
So how were you last year in regards to employees with not very many people wanting to work? Were you looking for people?
Well, I had one solid guy that stayed with me the whole year. He was there, from the winter on. And then I had another guy who had worked for me in the past came back. So I had two really solid guys right away by April 1st. And those guys could handle most of my recurring clients. And I was able
Awesome.
to focus on projects myself with uh, occasional new hires. So anybody I hired after April last year was pretty much working with me on projects. So I would usually have three guys with me on projects and then two guys full time working on recurring.
So when you hired them for
Yeah.
recurring, you got them trained up in a couple weeks and then kind of just let them do the recurring while you did
And like
estimates and projects.
exactly, like I said, they had worked for me before, and so they knew a lot of the routes. They had pretty good technique. They didn't. They really needed almost no training because they had worked for me in the past. One I had retained from the previous year, and one was a comeback employee who had worked for me before.
And
So it was really easy. Go ahead. Sorry.
had you implemented P for P for the ones that had already been there for a while?
I, I did for the recurring. So this is the way that it worked out. They were both, whenever I would do them on solo, they were hitting pretty good P for P numbers. Whenever I joined them up, their efficiencies dropped to where they weren't making much more than their hourly rate. They were both getting 17 base pay,
Mm-hmm.
and their P for P numbers, and I take the responsibility for that. My pricing structure was not where it should be. I priced too low. Some of the larger properties, the acreage properties, were dealing with wet yards, and just their numbers were not hitting the kind of where it was lucrative to be bonus. Um, so that, and I take the responsibility for that. It was just poor pricing on my part. But they had worked some P for P and they were familiar with that.
So this coming year and beyond, what are your goals for your business?
So I have pretty audacious goals, and I almost even hate to say them, but they're pretty audacious. So maybe I'll keep them to myself. But I do want to, because I don't want to get that, that dopamine rush of putting it out there. This is what I'm going to do. I'd rather just do it and look back and say it was done. But I'm looking for significant growth in my recurring numbers. I've got a whiteboard at home. I have the number I want on it. I have correlating revenue numbers that'll go with that as well. So, and I'm working with Chuck a little bit to get some marketing strategies because it's that balance of pumping the cash in, being able to have the equipment and the personnel to meet the demand. So it's a tightrope to grow fast, but I'm ready to do it.
So your goal is to grow this year, not to just
Yeah.
maintain.
No, and I struggle with that at conference, whether or not to just stick in profit mode. And there's nothing in me that just wants to tread water. So I would rather just go out and sprint and see where it goes.
Yeah, awesome. So you have a revenue goal for the year, for the season.
Hmm. I do.
That's fantastic. So if you had to do it all over again, coming to Augusta, what would you do differently?
Well, I think, looking back, I would follow the systems more closely than I have. And I think there's a little bit of barrier for older guys, and maybe for anybody that's been in the industry, joining a new way of doing things. But there's a humbling process into learning. So you have
Yes.
to not only take the time, you have to humble yourself to say, I need to do this. I need to learn this. Admitting to yourself, I don't know what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and sometimes there's just that says, I'll figure this out. Can you still hear me?
I can. Yep.
Okay, hold on. My audio just died on me. Let me see if I can turn you up. Okay. Yeah, if you can still hear me, that's good.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's a part of just the submission process of I need to submit myself to learn new concepts and go through the frustration of trying to learn it. I think also too, I would take more time to part of that's the self-education. I would take more time to learn the systems, and then I've probably been more selective on the hiring. Hiring's been very frustrating, and sort of getting this. I've got all these demands. I'll just take
Mm-hmm.
anybody that's available, and that becomes frustrating.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So overall, do you feel like it's been a benefit to you in more ways than just the business? Like you as a person, Have you had any kind of growth, like in friendships, relationships, spiritually, physically, because of the people and the surrounding and the really transparency and authenticity of Augusta? Has any of that benefited you?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's I would say the meetings reflect that. So our first annual meeting was canceled because of COVID.
Right.
So uh Washington was shut down. So we met with a smaller group in Augusta, Georgia, with Brian and those guys. And I already knew Kevin and Nick from Memphis. They're real close to me geographically. They're just 2 hours away. And they're one of the originals too. So those, just some of those groups of guys, getting to know them going back 3 years ago or 2 years ago, you realize, when you're around quality people, and
Mm-hmm.
not just people that are, high character, they're hardworking, they're kind and generous, uh, they're ambitious without being cutthroat. Like there's a balance there.
Right.
And so even right away, just even when we were much smaller than we are now, and then fast forwarding to just, last month being at the conference, and you get the sense from the conversations that you were surrounded by the upper echelon of people in our industry.
Mm-hmm.
Just hearing testimonials, just seeing guys who are absolutely killing it from the
Yeah.
gate, people coming in with successful businesses and doing buy-ins, like, Ryan down at Corpus Christi and people like that. You see, like there's a high quality element to the Augusta and the people that are in
Mm-hmm.
Augusta. And that's the kind of people I want to be around. And I would say it's definitely caused. I'll go back to what I said earlier. It's the rising tide raises all the ships, and it's definitely a group of people, a group of men and women that I love being associated with.
Mm-hmm. And think of all the relationships that we all have that we would have never, ever outside of Augusta met one another all over the US and Canada.
No, absolutely, and that's another thing too. You can be it's easy to be on isolated on an island, especially if you're an entrepreneur. Most of the people you know are people that work for you, or you work for
Yes.
them.
Right.
Your clients, whatever. So you can surround yourself with people where you have a reciprocal relationship up and down, but there's a large peer group. And I'd been in men's groups at church and that sort of thing, and that helps. But having a group of guys, like we're in a WhatsApp group with a smaller group of Augusta franchisees, and we'll shoot each other encouragements and challenges. We're all going through a physical and a mental challenge right now for about 11 weeks, and just being to have guys across the North America that are like-minded,
Mm-hmm.
that's a beautiful thing. It's really nice to have.
Yes. So right now, what you just mentioned, 75 hard, that is
Right.
where you've been a big influence. So you actually came here before our summit and conference, and what did you do? Why did you come here early?
Okay. Yeah. So New Year's Eve, I ran a marathon, which I had not. I used to be an avid runner. Well, I may be overstating it. I do love to run. I used to run a lot more than I do now, and landscaping can sometimes conflict with that. Or it's easy to use it as an excuse.
Yep, because you're already
And so
tired.
I just gotten back into it about 6 months ago, and just some more consistent running. And then um, I was challenged to do something hard by the end of the year. Great challenge. I love that challenge. And so I picked the very last day of the year to do something hard and
How
ran.
about that?
Squeezed in there right at the end.
In the rainy, cold Northwest.
Absolutely. And at that point, see, here's what's when you get the mentality, and these are the kind of people I want to be surrounded with, is when something hard and something is challenging, that you enjoy it. Like you actually like, yes, it's raining. Like this is good. Like I can't move my hands at the end of the race. It's so cold. But it's that sort of challenge that brings growth.
Yeah, and you have people that are just as crazy to be out there with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was good. So your influence has been pretty impactful, though. So what did you challenge some of the franchisees to do next?
Yeah, so Andy Frizzelli is somebody I think probably a lot of people listen to. He's a motivator and influencer. And last year, I was going through some personal stuff. Like everybody, this personal life can have ups and downs. And I tried 75 hard last year, attempted it. It is a challenge. There's a list of requirements to do. You have to work out twice a day, every day, no days off for 75 days straight. One workout has to be outside, rain, sleet, snow, tornadoes, whatever. It has to be outside for 45 minutes. Very strict diet, no alcohol, no sweets, no cheat meals, zero cheat meals, zero cheating at
Wow.
all on what you eat and drink. You have to read 10 pages a day, and you have to take a selfie, which is just like a progress photo. I think that's all of it. But there's a list of things you have to check off every day.
And if you fail, you have to start back over.
Yeah, there's no
Day one.
exceptions. There's no 75 soft. There's no 75 medium. It's 75 hard.
Yes.
If you're doing anything other than 75 hard, you're not doing 75 hard. So, and if
Oh.
you fail, you go back to the beginning and start.
You have to drink a gallon of water too, right?
A gallon of water a day. That's what it is. Yes, and I have my
Yes.
gallon back here.
Awesome.
So a lot of bathroom breaks.
Yes, for sure, for sure. So did you challenge a whole bunch of franchisees to do it again with you?
Yeah, and well, actually, Mike, it goes back to Mike's challenge. So he wasn't doing the 75 hard, but he was basically saying and incorporate, some physical challenges into your own life and into your routines. And he was talking about, it was in one of Mike's minutes as a sidebar, and it had already been in my mind to start 75 hard this spring as sort of a way to kick off some mental toughness as the spring rush is starting. So in my mind, I intentionally wanted the two to coincide. And I'm just going to go through this really difficult physical, mental challenge, and I'm just going to be all in a focus and ready to go and not conquer the spring. So, and coming off the conference, I knew that there were a lot of guys that would resonate with that, that I could invite into a group with me, that we could all keep each other accountable. There are guys I could look up to that would help lead the way. So when I put that out there, I think we had 10 guys and one gal signed up.
Yeah, I was surprised.
Yeah.
I don't know if they know what they're getting into.
Well, actually, 2 of them have already done it. So that's a good thing. We have a leader in there who has gone through 75 hard. At least one, I think maybe 2 of the guys have. And so they're able to speak to the toughness of it and the challenge and encouragement. And yeah, it gets a little colorful in there. I can't use all the language that we use because Andy Frizzelli is a little colorful himself.
No kidding.
But we call each other out for sure.
That's good. That's good. So can you share with us a quote, maybe some podcasts, maybe some books that you listen to, but most importantly, a quote that we could send others away with?
Yeah, no, I like to, I mentioned Alex Hormozi. He's probably one of my favorites right now. I also listen to Andrew Huberman a lot because I'm a big fan of personal wellness. And I really think your ability to go out and do things and to think straight and to just accept the challenges that we have as entrepreneurs, your body has to be able to, handle that little sort of load. And so I'm big on health and wellness. So Alex Hormozi is a big one I recommend, especially for diet and sleep, nutrition, and that sort of thing. A lot of books I just reread or re-listened. I say read, but I listen to more books than I read. Is Grit by Angela Duckworth. And one of the quotes she said in there, I've heard it before, and it's sunk with me so well, especially coming out of being at the conference, starting 75 hard, trying to tackle some of these ambitious goals, dealing with the difficulties of our industry and all of that. Being in a startup, sort of business.
Totally.
All these guys are all very entrepreneurial. And one of the quotes that she observed, and one of the statements that she makes in that book, is that enthusiasm is common, endurance is rare.
That's
and I've been a weekend endurance warrior. Like we talked about the marathon. I've trained and raced, and I've had success and failures. And I love the resonance of enduring, going through hard things. And I've not been personally successful like I want to be. It's a personal challenge to myself. I want to be that guy who endures. And and there's been times this is hard. It's hard work. It's frustrating. There's so many things that can go wrong. There's so many things that will go wrong. And like everybody, I would assume, I've wanted to quit. I wanted to be like, why am I doing this? And sticking to it and endurance is rare.
Yep.
There's a lot of enthusiasm. You find that everywhere.
That is awesome. So now everybody's going to go listen to Grit and try to find that quote. Yeah, that's a good book. Yeah. Is that the one where her dad was very, very challenging for her, and she had this expectation of her dad that she couldn't measure up to?
Yeah, he was actually very condescending. His favorite
Yes.
thing to say to her was, she is no genius. You're not a genius. He would tell her that all the time. You're not a genius. And they're an Asian American family. I think
Mhm.
he's first generation. She's second generation Chinese. And there's a lot of social pressure.
Yes.
And the irony is, at the beginning, she's introduced as someone who won, quote, the Genius Award.
Isn't
So
that
she won this
crazy?
award for genius in psychology. And she goes back to flashbacks when she was a child. Her dad would constantly tell her, and as he's right, she affirms, he's right. I'm not a genius. I was not a genius.
But
But she got to
somehow,
where she is by grit.
the whole world gave her an award for being a
The whole world
genius.
thinks he is.
Imagine
Yeah,
that.
imagine that.
Well, I really appreciate your time today. I appreciate that you're part of Augusta Nation and that you're one of the first 10 that have stuck it out with us. We've grown so much in so many ways, and we're still really at the beginning. We have 120 locations, and our goal is 1,000. And so we have a long ways to go, but we'll always look back and remember this time of those of us at the beginning that really built it together. And so I appreciate that you're with us doing this.
I'm honored to be a part of it.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time. You have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Liz. You too. Bye.